In thinking about the land use implications of renewables, we can't forget the land use impacts that fracking and major gas pipelines would have had if they had been allowed to go forward. And while I spent a good part of my career conserving land and protecting thousands of acres of beautiful places in New York and beyond, I don't think renewable energy development is the threat that it is sometimes painted to be. Developers need both a permit and they need community support, so they have every incentive to avoid wetlands, deforestation, and endangered species. And the NYSERDA contracting process, both the Clean Energy Standard and New York Sun, have a disincentive for soil types 1 through 4 and an incentive for certain locations like brownfields, landfills, and parking canopies. And the New York State Build Ready program is designed to identify hard to develop sites like previously used industrial locations. And all of these mechanisms are designed to site projects in locations where they don't have to cut down trees or use prime agricultural lands. And with all of these incentives and disincentives in place, there's going to be less impact to these resources. But as with all commercial and industrial land uses, there will be some, and that's the balance that New York State is going to have to strike.
What I would recommend is that waivers be given. My understanding is that specific waivers have already been given to specific humanitarian organizations so that they do not have to fear that any operations within Afghanistan would interact with the sanctions regime and would cause problems for that particular NGO. So I think that's one. I think the specific waivers, I would initially gear them more towards UN agencies and NGOs that have had a long history working within Afghanistan. So of course there's the UN, then there's the whole umbrella associated organizations, the World Food Program, the World Health Organization. These are the type of organizations that have very long, extensive experience in Afghanistan. And the Taliban have, I think, been somewhat differential to them because they recognize the importance of the UN agencies. And so I think I would start there. And then there's a number of NGOs that have decades-long experience in Afghanistan who have even worked with the Taliban in the 1990s. And so I think there's the Swedish organization. There's a few NGOs from Sweden. There's obviously USA. There's a whole host of NGOs that have experience working in such regions. And I think third, maybe take a look at how such organizations operated with the Taliban back in the 1990s. There is unfortunately, there is an experience there. So they were in control. In the past 20 years, they haven't, and now we're back in that same situation. So how were humanitarian organizations implemented during that time? I think that can be something we can learn from.
In relation to Turkey's continued role in operating and providing the security of the Kabul International Airport, which obviously is a very important hub, both for Afghanistan, but also in terms of the international engagement with the country. And at this point in time, it is also extremely critical to ensure the safe passage of remaining individuals, both foreign and Afghani, who wish to exit Afghanistan. Obviously, that issue came up, particularly in the aftermath of the meeting between President Biden and President Erdogan. And it was seen potentially on the part of Turkey as an attempt to leverage its contributions in Afghanistan through a continued role in the airport in its relations with the United States. I am a bit skeptical as to how far that can go, because of two reasons. First of all, the United States has made it very clear that Afghanistan is yesterday's priority. It is not today's nor tomorrow's priority for the United States. It is definitely making a strong, if you will, strategic shift in terms of its focus and engagement in Afghanistan, despite all the strong words of commitment in terms of humanitarian issues and so on. And the second aspect of it, which leads me to be skeptical about Turkey leveraging this vis-a-vis its relations with the United States, has to do with the plethora of problems that Turkey and the United States have in their bilateral relations. I doubt that, particularly given the lesser significance of Afghanistan in Washington's eye, any significant commitment on the part of Turkey will go too far. The United States will recognize that and appreciate it, as they have stated through official statements, but it will not go much beyond that.
Because we should be having conversations all along the way about, 13 years later, 2014, we're looking at what this ISIS threat is. What's the action the United States should take? And as Peter very importantly noted, this is not kind of the self-defense piece of it. This is the offensive. What is the action the United States should take? What do the American people want us to do? What is the United States Congress willing to authorize? And in the landscape where these AUMFs just hang out there available for use, none of those conversations have to happen. And that's to the detriment, I think, of our national security. That's to the detriment of a bit of responsibility, because I do think members of Congress, should have to take those votes and be accountable for them, rather than sort of pointing this president, that president. And then as they extenuate and as we get further and further from the AUMFs, so too do we get further and further from the responsibility of it all.